We have breaking news now. The Supreme Court has upheld the law that could ban TikTok. The justices ruled the law does not violate the First Amendment. The popular video sharing app now faces a ban in the U.S. unless its Chinese parent company, ByteDance, sells to a U.S.-based company in the next 2 days. Let's bring in senior Washington reporter David Muir and ABC News legal contributor Brian Buckmeyer for more. Devin, does TikTok have any legal recourse left, or is this it? Sell or be banned?
Well, this is the final word on this law, Diane, and the Supreme Court just moments ago handed down a unanimous opinion that was not signed, meaning that it was supported by the entire court. We don't know who wrote it, but it does look like Chief Justice John Roberts saying that TikTok's argument that this law passed by large bipartisan majorities of Congress, signed by President Biden, does not violate the First Amendment rights of the company or its 170 million users here in the United States. The justices explain at length how a law like this one meets a significant government interest of protecting the United States national security for a number of concerns over Chinese collection of Americans' data and also their alleged use of the platform to spread propaganda in the United States. And therefore, by this decision, the Supreme Court effectively says that this law can stand and the ban against TikTok can go into effect on Sunday unless the parent company ByteDance, that's the Chinese-owned company, sells its stake to any other buyer that is not a foreign adversary of the United States. And there's, of course, a lot of swirling headlines about the possibilities there, but the Supreme Court definitively saying that this law can stand and a ban can go forward, Diane.
Brian, I know you're still reading through the decision, but what do you make so far of how the justices came to this decision?
So when it comes to First Amendment violations or the allegations of such, what the courts will do is look at what is being banned and how it is being banned. What they're describing is what's called a content-neutral ban, meaning that the government didn't go out and say, you know what, any information that talks about X or Y should be banned. That would have a higher level of scrutiny. What they're saying is this is actually not a direct ban. If anything, it's telling a company that they need to divest in order to be able to participate in their company within the United States, or they're completely gone. They're not selecting specific speech. And so in doing that, the court is saying, one, this is technology that we're not too familiar with. We're rushing in some sense to get the answer out here. Two, this is content neutral, and it's not about the specific speech that's being made, but the manner in which this data is being collected. And as Devin pointed out, the security risks that are put forward here and that the government is worried about outweighs that of the risk of violating or potentially violating First Amendment rights. So it's well written out. I'm still kind of going through it, but that seems to be the consensus as to why we're here.
So because the ban is aimed more at data collection and who owns the app versus what kind of speech is happening on it, it's not a First Amendment violation.
Correct. And when you talk about First Amendments, you often talk about how someone is being limited, what is being limited, and what means it's doing so. And it seems like the law here navigated those rules of First Amendment violations and the law in a way that the Supreme Court said that this is not about First Amendment, this is not a violation, and that there is an interest in which the government does have in protecting its citizens and its data, and this law does stand.
Devin, the Biden administration says they're leaving this to the Trump administration to implement, but the ban is supposed to go into effect in 2 days before Trump is sworn in. Trump has said he's going to save TikTok. So how is this all going to play out now? What are you watching for?
That's the million-dollar, maybe multi-billion-dollar question, Diane. As you know, TikTok is one of the most popular apps in the world. It's certainly here in the United States. So many users, half the country, if you believe the statistics, have used this app on a monthly basis. So that's a remarkable number of people turning to the app. Now, TikTok's attorney said during the oral argument just last week that the app will go dark on the 19th if, in fact, this ban does take effect. So we'll see what that actually means. There's been a lot of debate, a lot of speculation about how it will work. But keep in mind, to Brian's point, that this law actually was aimed at ByteDance. That's the company that it addresses. That's the company it regulates. And the Supreme Court today said that foreign companies, ByteDance is owned by the Chinese, don't have First Amendment rights. They don't have rights in the United States. And so, you know, really the law is forcing ByteDance to sell, and now they have 2 days to do that. We should say, you know, a deal of that magnitude very likely couldn't be executed in 2 days. But the law does include an exemption for the next president of the United States, well, either President Biden or President Trump, if in fact a deal is at hand. If ByteDance does decide in the next few hours to sell, there's a buyer that's come forward. If sufficient legal arrangements are in place, then the government can move forward and take that at its word and extend this ban, delay the ban for 90 days. So that's another possible development we could keep an eye out for here in the next little bit.
Brian, in the meantime, you've seen a ton of TikTok users start migrating to other similar apps. Also, I think most, if not all of them, also owned by Chinese companies, if not ByteDance themselves. So what does this decision mean in terms of precedents for other social media apps and other kind of TikTok copycats?
One is very difficult because I didn't even know how to use TikTok. I was trying to figure it out. Now we have to move to a whole other platform. But in terms of the narrowness of this decision, think of it this way. The Supreme Court is saying is if it has two wings and it has feathers and it has a bill, then it's a duck and it cannot apply in this way based on the law. So if other organizations come out and say, you know what, we have two wings, but we don't have feathers and we do have a bill, then the narrowness of this decision may not apply to other entities. And so what you're seeing is that the precedent's going to be narrowly tailored to the way in which ByteDance operated TikTok and the way in which TikTok collected information. If another company, foreign or domestic, decides to just go a little bit different than how the Supreme Court decided, that company may still exist. And I think the precedent is going to be other companies looking at this decision and saying, how can we exist with these rules in place?
So is this going to be congressional whack-a-mole if they try to ban them all? Is it just going to be some new company comes up and Congress has to pass a new law if they want to ban that one too?
Pretty much. It becomes a situation of if a different company comes at this in a way that ByteDance didn't, and they're operating in a way that the court did not imagine or did not contemplate, or that this law that is basically telling ByteDance that they need to divest in a different way, then yes, Congress might have to come up with a new law to adjust that. It's the way technology works. As technology grows, we find new ways to regulate and enforce and ensure that they're safe for all people participating.
Devin, so what's the immediate impact here? What are you watching for in literally the next 2 days?
Well, Diane, if in fact this goes forward in 2 days and takes effect, we are led to believe that American-owned companies that facilitate TikTok, so sites like Apple and Google and their app stores, won't be able to offer the app legally for download there or any future updates, at least so long as the ban is in place. So that'd be the first thing. The second question is what happens to all those people, those 100 million people who have TikTok on their phones? That's more of a murky question. The company says the app will go dark, but it's not entirely clear what that means. They haven't confirmed whether they'll flip a switch and turn it off. It is not illegal as of Sunday to have TikTok on your phone. It will not be a crime to use TikTok if it still works. So that will still be, playing out a little bit. But to Brian's point, this ban is only in effect in so long as a foreign adversary owns the back end of TikTok, and it can lift at any time. So as long as there's a deal that's worked out at some point, or the arrangement that TikTok has satisfies the government's concerns, then perhaps it can come back in full force even very quickly. So, a lot can happen in this space, and we've seen the negotiations take off. Donald Trump, of course, has invited the TikTok CEO to be front and center at his inauguration on Monday. There's some speculation as to maybe he'll be able to work out some kind of a deal there. But remember, Diane, just 4 years ago, he was the one who signed an executive order banning TikTok. He was the one that wanted it out of the country. He signed a law banning TikTok from all government devices, which remains in force today. If you're a government employee, you can't download TikTok. So, it's Donald Trump's method to use things like this for negotiation tactics. We'll see if he's able to pull something out of his hat. But in the meantime, come Sunday, according to the company, it will go dark.
And I do have some breaking news on that front, Devin. President-elect Trump has just posted on Truth Social that he spoke to President Xi Jinping of China, that the call was a very good one for both China and the USA, he says. And he says it's his expectation that they will solve many problems together and starting immediately. He says, we discussed balancing trade, fentanyl, TikTok, and many other subjects. President Xi and I will do everything possible to make the world more peaceful and safe. So it sounds like President-elect Trump has wasted no time trying to address this directly with the Chinese president. Of course, waiting to see what that all means. But what's your impression, Devin, or your reaction, I should say, to how much Trump has spoken about this, especially given, as you point out, he had a very different viewpoint in his last administration?
Right, and it's important to keep that context front and center as the new president comes in. And as we talk about the concerns about TikTok, these have been front and center for the United States government, Congress, Republicans, Democrats, from the CIA over to the Pentagon, President Biden, President Trump. There's really unanimity that this is a concerning situation, and they have been in negotiations with ByteDance for more than 4 years. So it's not as if this law simply came out of the blue and now all of a sudden the government is going to ban TikTok. They have tried to come up with some sort of a solution for data security, putting Americans in charge of TikTok security on the board, putting some of their data in an American-owned cloud run by Oracle. But at the end of the day, the government has said none of that is actually good enough. So whether or not Donald Trump can now come in and talk to President Xi and pull something out of a hat remains to be seen. It's possible, but it's not like he's starting from scratch in this space, Diane. And just to underscore the threat, I've heard from a number of former officials with the CIA and the NSA really emphasizing that this is dangerous. We're not just talking about, you know, a hacker getting your personal information online. We're talking about perhaps the biggest threat to the security of the United States, amassing large swaths of data on all Americans in every state, where they eat, what their faces look like, where they live, what their hobbies are. And the fear is, according to these officials, that someday down the line, if we were to get into a war with China or some kind of conflict, they would be able to weaponize that aggregate data in some way, maybe to pinpoint attacks, maybe to you know, shut down key pieces of electronic infrastructure. And so that's the real danger. It's not so much about hacking your individual video of you doing a silly dance, but it's really about what they can extract from all of that on an aggregate scale.
I don't know, some of us dance pretty badly, Devin. It could be dangerous. I'm out of time, but I do have one more quick question, Devin. We heard other Chinese-owned companies like Shein and Temu brought up in those Supreme Court proceedings. Now that the court has upheld this law, could we potentially see lawmakers try to go after other large Chinese-owned companies that also gather American data?
Potentially, you know, and what it's going to be up to law enforcement now to take another look at this law, because it isn't written specifically with ByteDance and TikTok in the text, right? I mean, they were the target and the purpose of this law, but the language of the law, which was upheld today by the Supreme Court, talks about foreign adversary-owned social media platforms. There are a bunch of those, right? And so it's going to be up to the Justice Department now of the Trump administration to say whether or not they're going to target any of these other Chinese-owned companies and apps that are prevalent in our society, and whether they might seek to bring some enforcement actions against them. So we'll have to see.
All right, Devin Dwyer, Brian Buckmeyer, thank you both.